Good morning, everybody. My name is Alison Sawyer, and I am here to deliver the webinar, which is the fourth in our series of planned webinars, and it explores food defence. Just to let you know that I've muted your microphones and your cameras, and the session is being recorded as well. So just as well, we've got a question and answer session at the end. So if you've got any questions, please do save those for the end and wait for the end of the session, and then we'll be happy to answer the questions. So just to give you a bit of an introduction to myself, so my name is Alison Sawyer, and I am a Salsa auditor and mentor. You're also joined by Sarah Hall, who is the certification manager for Salsa, and Jackie Slatter, who is the development manager for Salsa. So today's topics then, we're going to explore what is food defence, where can issues relating to food defence happen, the Salsa requirements, and how can we protect our food. So firstly then, we're going to explore what do we mean by food defence. So food defence is all about protecting the integrity and wholesomeness of the food that is in our supply chains and the products that we make within our factory. So basing it around our raw materials, and this can cause reputational damage. So food defence is more about deliberate acts. So this can be systems or processes, and it may cause harm to the food or your business. So when we think about things that we need to consider then, so the key factor behind deliberate acts are people. So remember, HACCP is a system that controls accidental contamination, and we're just considering in this session deliberate acts, which is carried out by people. So it could be things like deliberate contamination, electrical intrusion, so tapping into your computer systems, food fraud as well. So we're just going to go through exploring the terminology now. So adulteration then. So we've seen instances of this in products such as rice and olive oil. And adulteration then is reducing the quality of the food and drink by including a foreign substance in order to lower costs or fake the higher quality product. So in examples being in 2016, customs officials in Nigeria confiscated 2.5 tons of rice, which they were suspected had been made from plastic. We've also had instances of olive oil as well. So olive oil could have been, you could have mineral oil that has been added to it, or something like chlorophyll to make if it was, for example, extra virgin olive oil, to add it a further green colour. So it's about it's about reducing the quality of the product for this financial gain, and this could then cause a food safety risk. You're not adulterating it to cause the food safety risk, but this is a consequence of the adulteration. So substitution then, perfect example of this is where we had Horsegate, which I think we all remember, wasn't too long ago. Well, actually, it was about 10 years ago, wasn't it? But it just was still fresh in everybody's mind. So it's about replacing a food or an ingredient with another substance that is similar but inferior for an economic gain. So we're now going to talk about food fraud as well. So food fraud then is the sale of unfit food, which is potentially harmful. So it could be that you're selling food after its use by date, packing and selling meat with an unknown origin, or it could be a deliberate misrepresentation of food. So products that are substituted with a cheaper alternative could be farmed salmon sold as wild salmon, basmati rice, which is adulterated with cheaper varieties, making false statements about the sources of your ingredients. So moving on now, where can these issues happen? So there's two main places that this can happen, and this tends to happen in your raw materials and packaging that you buy in from your production facility. So we're just going to look at these in more detail. So how can we defend our food? So it's about making sure that our food, that our raw materials and packaging are secure. So have we got the right, have we got controls for higher risk ingredients and packaging, so that we've got this early detection? But then it can also happen in your factories as well. So it's about protecting food while it's in our factories and making sure that we've got these secure systems and procedures on site. So we're going to look at the Salsa requirements now. So where food defence is concerned, it falls under two distinct sections within the Salsa standard. So the first section being clause 1.6.4, and this is all about your raw materials and packaging. Or it can fall, and it also falls in section 4, and this is under the clause 4.2.3, and this is about your manufacturing site and how you protect the food that is being made. So if we explore the first clause then, which is 1.6.4, and this considers the raw materials and packaging. So this is where you need to consider which are the raw materials or packaging that are at a higher risk in your product from the raw materials and packaging that you are purchasing. There is a slight link to the supply chain. However, firstly, it's really important to understand which raw materials are a higher risk and which packaging could be a higher risk in terms of substitution, adulteration, and food fraud, and what existing controls that you already have in place. So when we look at the clause then, so I'll just read it out. So it's a documented risk assessment in relation to food fraud, adulteration, or substitution shall be conducted on all raw materials, including food contact packaging, and this should be reviewed annually. So the world changes all the time. Lots of things happen in the kind of the food and drink industry. So it's really important that you keep on top of knowing what's going on with regards to food, raw materials and packaging, and make sure that you review it at least annually. So the key thing then is know your ingredients so that you can understand what are the higher risk ingredients, so you can make sure that you're getting you've got the right controls in place. So think about, are you making any claims on your packaging, for example? So do you make a claim relating to the country of origin of an ingredient? If you're making a claim relating to Sicilian lemon juice, for example, the ingredient risk is higher than if you were just buying lemon juice and you weren't making that claim. Also, we've recently seen issues around meat and claims that the claims on pack is that the meat is of UK origin. However, it wasn't. It was not UK origin. It was from other countries. So just think about these ingredients that are, if you're making a claim on pack, you would want to kind of put some consideration around them, those being higher risk ingredients. Also think about variety as well. So as you're making claims on pack, are you making any claims about the variety? So oils are known to have been adulterated in the past. So how do you know that this has not been blended with a cheaper oil? For example, if you're buying extra virgin olive oil. Therefore, this will be classed as a higher ingredient in terms of food adulteration. So consider, for example, another example, if you're buying Bramley apples and you're making that claim on pack about the variety being Bramley. So how do you know that you are actually receiving Bramley apples? Does the person that you purchase from, do they grow or supply other varieties of apples as well? So that could be a higher risk ingredient as well. So other considerations then, so which part of the world are your ingredients coming from? Could that be perceived as being a higher risk? Could the product be something else? So if we're thinking about where in the world your products are coming from, if you are buying spices, how do you know that they are what they say they are? So we've seen examples of curry powder being mixed with starch powder and sawdust, for example. Here we've got a picture of brewery hops. So if you're buying hops, which you know are pretty safe if you're buying them from one of the 3 main UK hop companies, but what happens if you start buying hop pellets instead? Because they look quite similar to animal feed. So if you're buying another example is if you're buying a whole leg of lamb, it's clear that this is a leg of lamb rather than a leg from beef, from a cow. But however, what happens if you start buying, if you're actually buying minced lamb? So this could look very similar to other red meats. So just think about these raw materials and just understand which ones could be your higher risk raw materials. But don't forget about the packaging. So there were 219 notifications concerning food contact materials in the European Union on the Food Safety Alert System, which is called RASF, in 2022. Around half of which, 105, related to potential for chemicals to migrate into the food contact for the chemicals to migrate from the food contact packaging into the food materials. The chemicals included formaldehyde and lead. Substitution of lower grade packaging materials and food grade materials will be both profitable and difficult to detect. But think about pricing. So, in a world where the price of packaging is increasing, are you being offered packaging at a much cheaper price? Is it sounding like a bargain and it's too good to be true? Often it may be too good to be true, and there could be a reason behind that. So, packaging materials are unlikely to be tested for purposes of fraud detection. We've got the demand for post-consumer recycled resins far outstrips the supply of them as well. So think about your packaging as well. Is it supposed to be microwavable? Is it microwavable? Do you ever check that it's microwavable? Do you ever do these checks on it? So what we want to do now is just let you know about different areas where you can find this information. So it's really important that we keep ourselves up to date and consider what is going on in the food and drink industry, UK-wide and across the world, because that may also affect some of our products, especially if you're buying in products that are grown in other countries. So keep yourselves up to date. Do this often, so don't wait and do it once a year, but keep up to date. Maybe consider doing it monthly. Maybe look at it quarterly, but just keep yourselves up to date. And just there's various places that you can look for this. So things like the Food Standards Agency website, they have an alert system, and you can log onto there and you can set yourself up with alerts. So it will alert you and send you an email if there is anything that is a topic that you should be aware of. There's also the RASF portal. So we've got a link on here. So again, you can look up specific product categories, food ingredients, and that will give you information about if there's been any issues around those ingredients. There's something called Trello, which is really good. So that's separated into different food categories, and it's got really good information on there that's really user-friendly and easy to use, that just tells you about food fraud risks, adulteration, substitution. But then also you might be a member of a trade organisation, so they can keep you up to date with things going on in the industry. And then LinkedIn's quite a good one as well, because LinkedIn, there's lots of information on there. So yeah, that's another way of keeping up to date. And then just Google as well. So have a Google of some of your ingredients and just see, has there been any instances of adulteration or substitution or food fraud around the types of ingredients and packaging. And then just keep yourself up to date with events in the relating to food in the news as well. So they're just some of the places that you can keep yourselves up to date and find out this information in relation to your raw materials and your packaging. So once you've got this information, we want to know, what do you do with it? So the clause talks about doing a risk assessment. So the method of risk assessment doesn't matter so much. It's more about capturing the information so that you can assess the risk to use and packaging. For those of you that are Salsa members, there's a tools and tips on this, but I'm going to share with you a format that you could consider using. There's many ways of doing this. However, this one's just quite a straightforward example that I particularly like. So just thinking about the risk assessment then, this is the part where you carry out this risk assessment, and this is where all your research comes together. So, has there been any previous known issues relating to the raw materials or packaging that could affect your business? And this is the bit where you you look at the occurrence. So here we've got a scoring system. So are there any known historical or recent problems in the industry? So you give yourself a scoring, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on whether you think it's fairly likely, very likely, or certain, or unlikely. Then what you want to do is you want to assess how easy it will be for you to detect those issues on your raw material and packaging. And that's where you also give it a score. So you would score it a 5 if it's very unlikely for you to detect, or a 1 if you were very likely or certain to detect it. So it's about you knowing your raw materials and your packaging, and just carrying out a simple risk assessment. Once we've done this, then we've got an example here. So it's useful to colour code the risk then. So just talking through this slide, we've got the raw material and packaging. So list your raw materials and packaging down here. Think about what is the hazard or the threat. So this is where you get your where you input the information that you have found from doing your research. And then you think about what control measures you already have in place. And then what can you do to monitor it? So monitoring is all about checking. So what are you going to be doing to check? And then are there any corrective actions that need to be put in place as well? So should something happen, what corrective action would you put in place? This is where you would put the scoring. So from the previous slide on the detection and the likely occurrence, put your scoring down, and that will then give you an overall scoring. It's like a matrix. And then this will tell you what the overall risk to that ingredient is, or that packaging. So if you've got something that scores as a high risk, that's where you would want to be thinking, actually, are the control measures that we already have in place, are they enough, or do we need to put something else in place? Is there something else that we can put in place? And if so, document what they are, put them in place, and then you can just risk assess it then, can't you? And it might be, and what you want to try and do is aim to get your reds down to an amber, ambers down to a green where possible. But it's all about making sure that you've got the right control measures in place, and what are your methods of monitoring and checking. So control measures then. So we just want to talk through this. So there's a difference between clause 1.6.1 in the Salsa standard, which relates to supplier approval. The clause that we're talking about now, 1.6.4, is not the same, because this talks about risk assessing raw materials and packaging. So, for example, if you identify an ingredient or packaging type through your risk assessment that's considered a higher risk, then you do need to focus on the controls that you've got in place. So think, like I've already said, think about what controls you already have in place, and do you think that these are robust enough? Do you need to put additional controls in place for those that are classed as higher risk? And additional controls might be that you ask the supplier for a certificate of analysis with every delivery. You might ask the supplier to send evidence of testing of the raw materials or packaging. So if you've got packaging, you might ask them to send you a certificate to prove that they have done migration tests on it, so that we've not got any of the, that we know that it is food safe. And where are you getting your ingredients and packaging from? So how long is the supply chain? Is something that you would consider. You want it to be as short as possible, because there's less room for intentional errors. So, for example, when there was the whole issue with Horsegate, there was very long, complex supply chain. So it was really hard to identify which country even, but whereabouts in the supply chain this was the issues were happening. So what evidence do you have that your suppliers are reputable? So as you can see, it does link in slightly with the approved supplier, but it's not the same. So, for example, if you're purchasing your product from a supplier that has got BRCGS, FSSC 22000 or Salsa, then you can be pretty confident that you don't need to worry too much about the raw material, because they will already have these food defence procedures, controls in place, and they will be robust. However, if they're not, if they're not from there, you want to make sure that you do have some really good controls in place, and that the supplier does. So just to be clear, this is not about reducing existing controls that you may have in place where the supplier is BRC certified, FSSC 22000 or Salsa certified, but it is about focusing on these higher risk ingredients and packaging and making sure that you are happy with the current controls that you have in place for these higher risk ingredients. And if you're not, at least you're aware of them so you can put some better controls in place. So next then, we're moving on to section 4 of the standard, and this is where we think about on-site threats. So it's not about kind of your raw materials, it's about what happens on site. So the clause falls under clause 4.2.3. So there shall be a food security or defence plan that describes the site and product security threats and how they are controlled. The plan shall always include the security measures and/or practices to ensure only authorised personnel have access to production and storage areas on site, where digital records are used to demonstrate food safety and legality, how these records are protected in case of digital failure and digital cybersecurity attacks. So that sounds quite a long clause to get your head around. So it's basically thinking about when you are making the product, could anything happen that is an external threat? So somebody outside of your business, could they do something that could threaten the safety of the product? And then also looking at internal threats as well. So people that work within your business, could they intentionally do something? And this, again, is all about intentional rather than accidental. So let's break it down. We're going to start by thinking about external threats. So really good idea to do a satellite image from Google Maps, just to have a look at your business, the surrounding areas, have a look, use your site plan to have a look at the entrances and exits, have a look at your storage areas. How easy is the access onto your site? Do you have a gated area? How secure is your perimeter? How easy is it to get inside your storage areas as well? And if you've got any, if you've got any storage site, if you've got any storage tanks or silos for ingredients, perhaps, then are these locked off? How secure are these? Are they locked off and are they checked regularly? So start by thinking, who might do something to your business that could affect your product? So just think a bit like a criminal here. So have you got security cameras in the right places? And do they actually work? How long is the information stored for on these security cameras? So if you did need to investigate something, would you be able to look back at it? Are these backed up on some kind of a computerized system? Train your employees on what to do and who to report visitors to. So, do you have an appointment only system for visitors? Teach your employees as well what to say, because not everybody feels comfortable with going and talking to a stranger. So if they see somebody on site that they don't recognise, either hanging around outside the site or or trying to get into the premises, or actually inside the premises, then give them a few examples of the kinds of things to say. So it might be something along the lines of, "Oh, hello, you're looking a bit lost there. Can I help you?" Or, "Who are you here to see? Let me go and get them for you. Just wait there and I'll come get them for you." But, just teach them the kinds of things that they want to say. Because like I say, not everybody feels comfortable going up and approaching a stranger. So think about your computer systems. So how secure is your antivirus software? We hear all the time about people sending phishing emails, but train people that have access to your computer systems. If they get an email that it's a phishing email, do they know what is meant by a phishing email? If they get one that's from someone they don't know and it looks a bit suspicious, teach them to hover over the email address so that they can see, is it actually from that person or is it from somebody else, and not to open attachments. Do all these basic things that you would expect to do at home, but teach people that are in your workplace. So, These are some of the things to think about, is how can somebody from the outside who doesn't work for your company affect your business? So now we're going to go on to think about internal threats. So how well do you actually know people that work for you and work within your business? What might motivate your employees to cause harm to food or your systems, so computerized systems, recipe systems, or your business reputation? So who has access to computers and information? You've got a lot of information on your computer systems. Have you got cameras in the right areas as a deterrent, but also to help you investigate, but more of a deterrent, really? And then, recipe control. Your recipes are really valuable to your business. That is your point of difference. How are you controlling these recipes? And then poor quality products. So that's another thing. So if you have got some product that might be, a reduced quality and you don't want to sell it, it gets put on hold. How is that controlled? Make sure that somebody can't get access to that product and then go and sell it on the Facebook Marketplace or something, because that's going to damage your reputation. So think also, have you got any areas of your businesses where you might have somebody working alone in a particular area? Think about what controls that you've got in place in that area. Could something happen to that could put your product at risk? Is your product in the lone working area? Is it open product, or is it a fully sealed system? But just have a think of just some of the things that you want to start thinking about. So again, what do you do with this information? So you do all your research, think about all of these things, and then what do you do with that information? So we want to do a food security defence plan, which is what this is what the clause says. So this part can get carried out as a risk assessment, but it doesn't have to be a risk assessment. So you could write this up as a document. Just think about, do you need to put in place further controls to mitigate those hazards, though, that you've identified? But it's about in your food defence, security and defence plan, describe the site, what's surrounding it, who are your neighbours, what are the access points, and product security threats, and how are they controlled? Identify the area of risk within your business. And for each area of risk, identify the hazard and be really clear about it. And then decide what is going to be controlling that. So have you got enough in place to control it, or do you need to do something else? And but the important thing is that you keep it alive. So put action owners, when you've put a timescale, make sure you've got an action owner on there so that you can keep it alive. Make sure you've got a timescale for who's going to put these additional measures in place. Make sure you review it regularly. So it doesn't say how often you need to review it, but review it regularly. So how are you going to check and control that these measures are being followed as well? So if you put some control measures in place, so for example, you might have put something in place to say, anybody that works on a computer, they need to, when they move away from the desk, they need to put a lock on the computer. So that, the password protection. But how are you going to check that people are doing that? So you might carry out an audit or an inspection, like have a series of questions, and then you just, a yes or a no. So when people move away from the desks, are they putting the password protection lock on? So think about all of these things that people could that could be a threat within your business, and then do kind of an audit or an inspection. And you might do it 6 monthly, you might do it annually, you might do it monthly. It just depends on your site. But just think about this, and just think it's all well and good having these checks in, having the controls in place, but make sure that you're checking that people are following them. And if they're not, we need to do some more training so that people understand it's all about protecting your business. So that's all that we've got for today. So just to let you know that we have been running a series of these webinars. So we've already done an introduction to Salsa, effective traceability, and food defence plans. And the next one that we've got coming up is on the 12th of October, which is preparing preparing your brewery for an audit. So we hope that you found it really informative and useful. The webinars, if you have missed them, the webinars that you have missed, you were able to catch up on our socials on them. So they're on YouTube, they're also on LinkedIn, and they're on our website as well. So if you've got any more questions, then please do stay on the line. But thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that you do keep in touch with us. We love keeping in touch with you all. So the office number is on the slide there, or you can email the office as well if you'd rather do it by email. But please do link in with all of our socials. We're here to help you and support you as well. So please do, make sure that you do keep in touch, because we do like, we like to be this support function as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're now available for questions. So Sarah Hall, the certification manager, will be on the line as well for questions. But yes, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we will.
Haven't got any questions as yet. Okay, so the first question's just come through. Would this food defence cover TASUP legislation?
Cover TASUP as well. So that would be kind of your raw material. The first section would cover that, yes.
Did you want to explain what TASUP and VASUP stand for?
Yeah, so TASUP stands for, TASUP's all about the threats in your, it's all about the threats within the so before the raw materials come on site, so it's all about the threats in the supply chain. And VASUP is all about vulnerability, so vulnerabilities on site. So yes, you might have heard of it called TASUP and VASUP, but yeah, so this what we're doing here would cover that, yes.
Yeah, we've just tried to keep away from too many acronyms.
Yeah. Trying to keep it simple so that it's easy to understand.
Okay, so just getting lots of thanks through, so that's really nice to see.
Yeah, good. We've all found it useful.
We'll stop on the line for another few minutes if anybody has any questions still. And as Alison said, if you want to contact the office directly, if you want a little time to think about your questions, then please do so. So we've got a question that's just come up about packaging. So what type of packaging tests can you do?
So on packaging then, you can do, so your suppliers normally do the packaging test, but the packaging tests relate to migration tests as well. So they relate to migration tests. So whether the plastic or the material that the packaging has been made from, whether under certain conditions, so whether it's under acidic or oily conditions, and also heat as well, up to 40 degrees, whether the materials made to make packaging migrate into the food, into that food substance. So that's one key thing, is about making sure that you've got some migration test certificate, and also that you've got confirmation that the packaging is food grade. I'm not aware of any other tests. I'm not kind of big on packaging really, but Sarah, do you know of any other packaging tests? I'm not a specialist in packaging, to be honest.
No, sadly, neither am I. But I think, as you were saying earlier, obviously at your goods in checks, you can check that the packaging looks similar to what you've received before. Check that it hasn't been sort of the thickness of the packaging hasn't been reduced, that it's still withstanding the processes that you're going to put it through. There may be a sort of a difference in colour if you're receiving something that's had a slightly different kind of raw material base to it. And you talked about microwavable packaging. obviously you can try that when your material comes in, because it's not very successful trying to microwave plastic that isn't designed for the purpose.
I think as well, just have a look at when you've got your goods in a packaging. People don't think to do inspections of the packaging, really. They just don't really think about that. So, think about if it's if it was a microwavable tray, it's got a lip on. They have like a lip on the rim of them, don't they? But just have a look at the cutout of that as well. So if it's a rectangle tray, how neat is it? Kind of slightly off center, so it's not quite rectangle. What is the lip like as well? So not only, and how flat is the top of it? So I've come across packaging before where the surface of it isn't flat. Now that could just be an issue from the supplier when they've made it, but it could also be an indication that it's not what it should be as well. So it might have been made from poor quality materials, and therefore it's not been cut right. It's not been, it's not been made right. So I would just, like Sarah said, look at the packaging, start to take notes of the packaging. Like with your raw materials, you might want to start doing photo standards of your higher risk raw materials, or a little description of it. But I definitely encourage the people that work within the factory. They're your eyes and ears, really, aren't they? So they handle this packaging day in, day out. They handle your raw materials day in, day out. So just educate them on if they're handling something that doesn't quite look or feel as it normally does, to highlight it to you. So it might be an issue that you need to look into in more detail, because it might have had some substitution or adulteration along those lines with it. So, for example, if somebody's working with a powdered ingredient every day, and actually it just looks a little bit different. So it looks a little bit, it's a bit more granular than normal, or the texture is not quite right, not as it normally is. Get your people to raise that with you, because you want to investigate that in more detail, because they're the people that are kind of looking at these things every day and handling them within your factory. And likewise, when you're getting ingredients in, have a look at labels as well. So when you get your raw materials in, have a look at the label. Has it been overstickered, or what's the print quality like on the label, on the on the ingredients label or the packaging label? Does it look different to normal? Is it in a different color bag to normal, for example? So these are all things that are kind of top tips on things that would be useful to look out for. So photo standards are good of what it normally looks like when it comes in at goods in, whether it's the ingredient, the packaging, or the outside packaging of the palette that it normally comes on. What colour bags is it normally in? Because this would be a good indication. And we see lots of ingredients, but yeah, so that's another good thing to look out for.
Thank you, Alison. We've had another question here about whether allergens in raw material are a threat.
So if something has been it's a really good question, actually. So if something has been adulterated, or we've had substitution on it, but yeah, if we've replaced so substitution, if we are replacing the whole item and we're adding something else into it, then yes, it could cause an allergen issue. So there has been issues in the past where ground almonds, people have mixed it with ground peanuts, because obviously peanuts are cheaper than almonds. So that has then caused, obviously peanuts are classified differently to tree nuts. So yeah, so that could create an allergen issue. The purpose is, though, with food defence, it's this intentional. So rather than it being where you're thinking of it with your HACCP, where we've got on site that could be an accidental, this is about intentional and doing it to cheapen the product or for financial gain. So yeah, so allergens is something that could be an output of where something has been substituted. Yes. But try and keep your risk assessments very separate. So you have your allergen risk assessment, and then you would have your food fraud risk assessment. Sorry, food defence.
Thank you very much, Alison. The recording will be available on the website next week. And if you do have any questions for us, please do contact us in the office. Thanks very much.